Hello everyone and welcome to Bikini Design Club. If you are new here, welcome and we hope you like our videos. So let's start with the tutorial today. On our table today we have our first baby pattern. It's a diaper cover called Bloom. And we have it from 0 to 3 months, and then the bigger size is till 18 months. The great thing about this pattern is that depending on the fabric you use, you can make it for a boy or a girl. It's the same. You can also add a lot of details, which I'm gonna do today using ruffles for a girly look. And I'm gonna sew 3 to 6 months. Of course, using the pattern pieces with the fold on the center front and the fold on the center back. You will have all the pieces on the PDF file layered by size, so you just need to choose the size and cut. We also provide all the measurements for you to cut the elastic, the supplies you need, everything you need to know, the rectangles for the ruffles, the rectangle for the legs, because we are doing like a fold over but with fabric, with swimwear fabric. Also for the waist, all the measurements are mentioned on the pattern once you buy it. So I have already cutted my fabrics today, so let's start preparing the patterns to sew. On my table now I have here the waistband. I've actually cut it longer than I needed, but you will have the exact measurements on the pattern once you buy it, okay? But I've just used a different fabric because I feel like it's going to match perfectly with the back ruffle that I'm going to make. And everything, as I told you, is mentioned on the pattern. Then I have these two fabrics that I'm going to use to make the ruffles, and these measurements are also mentioned on the pattern, but of course you can be creative, you can change them, you can do 3 layers, you can do wherever you want. But in this case today I'm going to be using these two fabrics to do my back ruffles on my back piece. I also went ahead and cutted 2 layers of fabric and 2 layers of stabilizer, and this will be panels where we will place our snap fasteners, plastic snap fasteners, to close on the bottom of the diaper cover. Of course, the stabilizer doesn't have any stretch, and this will make our job of placing the fasteners much easier, and it will make the garment durable. All these rectangle pattern pieces are mentioned on the pattern, but we don't actually provide the rectangle because I don't think you need to. It's just a rectangle. We provide the centimeters or inches, so you just need to follow the instructions and cut the pieces. So that's easy. We will have elastics on the leg holes, and so we also have 2 rectangles again which I cut it with this matching fabric for us to do. It's like if it was a fold over elastic, but in my case I'm not going to use fold over elastic or any other fabric. I'm going to use the same fabric as the pattern, but I'm going to show you in just a minute another option that you have. If you have fold over elastic, of course you can also use it. It's a little bit more difficult with this fabric because we will need to do folds like I'm showing here, but I eventually got to do it perfectly, and I don't think it's that hard, so go ahead and try because I think you will succeed. With these fabrics, with this fold over more or less that we are going to create, we will make a channel for the elastic. So I wanted to also show you an option if you have it at home. Instead of cutting this from the matching fabric, I wanted to show you this white and also the other one on my table. It almost doesn't have any stretch, but this is very soft, and as you can see it already has the folds. So of course it's easier if you have and if you want to use them, and you actually don't need this to be elastic, because you are gonna rush the elastic on the leg holes. But I actually don't want to use it because I think with the water they will get soaked, and the texture and everything, I really don't want to use them, despite it would be easier. Neither this one in blue, which I don't think it's comfortable for the babies. So I decided to use my swimwear fabric to replicate the effect of these fold-over fabrics, and to create my channels. I will be using braided elastic today. It's 6 millimeters wide. I think we can also use the rubber elastic if we want to, but in this case, because it's more durable, of course, for the water, for the pools, for the chlorine and salt water, etc. But I really prefer using this one for the channeling, so I will be using this today. When I had my son, I always reused clothes, so I always used from my friends and then I gave them again to other friends. And I think we should all reuse the most times we can. But anyway, I really decided to use the braided elastic this time. It's much easier for me, and in this case I think it will last enough anyway. Today I'm also going to be using my Prym pliers. Sorry, I forgot the name. My Prym pliers. This was actually a bit expensive, and it has a lot of extra buttons and fasteners that I can use, but I'm not going to be using the metal buttons that came with the plier. I'm going to be using the fasteners in plastic, because of course for the water they are more durable. If you don't have this, don't worry, you also have other options. You can sew by hand, like the ones I have on my little box on the right. You can sew them by hand. They are clips that you can sew. You can use Velcro that you can also sew to both sides, the male and female, for the Velcro. But actually I don't like the Velcro to go to the beach because of the sands, but well, it's an option. And in the future I will also, using the same pattern, I will also make a tutorial without any fastener on the lower part of our diaper cover. I will probably do this on the side, and I will also do a version without any buttons, fasteners. So we have, using this pattern, you can really play around. You can do a lot of different options and make this look very, very different. So you can choose whatever supplies you have at home and go from there. So I'm going to start by rushing my ruffles on the edge, and to do so I'm going to sew with a very large stitch on the edge of both my ruffles. I'm going to sew leaving a tail in the beginning and in the ends, and then I'm going to pull the tail, and I'm going to create the amount of rush that I like for my ruffles. But I will show you this in detail, because on my sewing machine, and probably on yours, if you increase the tension, you will also already have some effect, some rushes. So keep up and watch how I do it. So let's start by doing that. So the first thing we need to do is to adjust our machine. I've adjusted the tension to 9. Usually I have this on 4 or 5, but I have adjusted this to 9, and this will mean that once you are sewing, you will already have a certain amount of gathering, just like you see here. Okay, so this is the way I do it to get together. If I want, I can still pull more the threads and do this even more, this effect, but to start with I change the tension to 9. Then my straight stitch would be, normal stitch would be 2.4, but I increase the length and I go up to 4.5 or 5 if you want. And then we just need to start sewing from the edge of the fabric the entire edge, and we will have the gather, at least the first gather, already done. Don't forget to leave the tail with 8 centimeters more or less on your threads. I'm gonna show you. So you can already see here my tail. I'm not going to start with any back stitch. I just place my fabric under my needle, and now I'm gonna start sewing without any back stitch. And sew from the beginning until the end, and in the end, again, no back stitch, just put the needle up, pull the fabric and cut, leaving again 8 centimeters more or less of threads. Once we have both our ruffles ready, it's time to attach the first one to the pattern. In this case, this is again an option, and you can decide to play around with this as you like. So I'm gonna just place this first one. First I'm gonna, of course, pull a little bit more because I want to create more dramatic effect on my ruffles, and so this is very simple. You pull the tail and you will adjust and distribute evenly throughout your ruffle, and when you feel like it's okay according to the size that you need, you tie 2 knots on the tails, and your ruffle will be ready. And then I will do the same for the other one. The next thing I'm going to do is to actually sew the first ruffle on the back part of my pattern. And so, since I want my pink with the dot white to be on top and to be on the waist area, I'm going to see more or less the distance that I need so that you will not see the seam of this yellow ruffle. So I'm going to see more or less the distance, and I'm going to sew together this yellow ruffle to the back panel with a zigzag stitch on the edge of the fabric. So place both ruffles on your bottom, see more or less where you want to place it, and pin in place. I pin horizontally the entire area, and I went to my straight stitch machine, and with a zigzag stitch I secured my first ruffle to my back part. Time to repeat the entire process for the top ruffle. So do exactly the same, tie the tails on both sides, distribute evenly on the top edge of your back bottom, pin in place, and sew with a zigzag stitch, making sure it is correctly aligned. And it will completely cover the other stitch that we have just done to secure the lower ruffle to our back piece. Time to combine our back with our front. Never mind on the sides that you have excess on the ruffles, because we will trim that once our sides are sewn together, back with front. So no problem, okay? So now place right sides facing together, your back with your front. Pin on both sides, and we will sew. To sew this area, you can use a zigzag stitch, a straight stitch, or if you want, you can serge. I'm gonna go and overlock this or serge, whatever, because for me, I think it will be more secure, and I don't mind with the seam because the baby will have diaper, so I'm not very worried about the seam. And I use very soft fabric and very soft threads, so I'm not going to worry, and I'm just going to pin the sides and sew them on my overlock. Once we have our sides ready, I always like to trim the excess threads, as you know, so I'm gonna go ahead and trim them. But reverse the piece to the right side. Grab the two pieces of fabric that we have cutted and that are mentioned on the pattern, the thin ones that are gonna create the channels for the leg holes, and let's grab them and let's align them from one side to the other, making the curve from the bottom to the front. Let's align them. The only thing I want to tell you here is that I added seam allowance, so don't worry if you have the strap is a little bit longer than the pattern. This is on purpose so that you are okay if you want to start a little bit with the strap going more than your pattern, and then we trim, no problem. If you are very experienced, you can do this without pinning, and you can go ahead and sew at the same time. I usually do this and I give a little bit of tension on my strap. This is not a strap, but you know what I mean. When I do that, it's very slightly, the tension is very soft, but it will make it go curve very nicely. But if you are not experienced, I really recommend that you pin everything in place. No problem with the pins, because we will then sew this with our straight stitch machine 0.8 from the edge of the fabric, and we will now attach the channel to the main fabric with right sides facing together, 8 millimeters from the edge with a straight stitch. Simple. I'm gonna pin just to show you, and then I'm gonna go to my straight stitch machine and sew the entire line. Do this on both sides, of course. So once this is sewn together, we will then, in the end, we will fold this inside, and you will not see this piece of fabric. We will fold this inside, and it will be very nice finish. But now I think I'm gonna do differently on both sides the finish so that you see, but I'm gonna explain slowly. So the goal is for us to stitch here on the edge so that we will create the channel inside and give a fold there and also stitch. But I'm going to show you in detail, don't worry. So let's go ahead slowly. When I was doing the tutorial, I didn't cut the straps with the measurements from the pattern that are mentioned. I just gutted them longer, and now I need to trim them. But you will have no not such excess fabric as I had. So we now have this on both sides, and I'm going to do two finishes so that you can see the difference. So on one side, I'm going to fold like I'm doing here, and I'm going to stitch on my straight stitch machine a very narrow stitch very near the edge, all around the edge from the front to the back, folding all these fabrics inside like I'm doing here, and now sewing with my outer fabric facing up on my table here, very near the edge. And we will do that on both sides. I will pin to make it easier, so go ahead if you want, also pin or go straight to your machine and do this stitch. My straight stitch machine, it's a Bernat B38, and I think I really need to invest on a new one, so you will see me struggling and placing extra fabric on the back part of my presser foot just to balance the height of the presser foot, because my machine is very sensitive to that, and so if I don't do this will be a mess. So never mind that piece of fabric that I place on the back of my presser foot. I think I'm really going to invest on a machine. I'm not sponsored or anything, but I really need to buy another one. I'm gonna call the store and I'm gonna buy one. That's it. So do the stitch. I'm gonna use a small stitch very near the edge, and we will be ready after we do this on both sides. And as you can see, the result is pretty nice. The edge is clearly defined and I really like it. So we now have a raw edge of the fabric that will be folded on one side, and you will see me doing it slowly so that you can follow. But this turned out great. I hope you were able to do it. If you weren't, try, practice. I'm sure you will with time, okay? Carefully cut the excess fabric that we have here inside, because this will be excess fabric inside the channel that we really don't need. But be careful not to cut fabric that you don't want to cut, of course. And then let's move on to our waistband, which in my case it's much longer than I needed, but I'm gonna check on the pattern the correct measurements and cut it accordingly, of course. But you at this point you already have your waistband cutted, so on each extreme of the band you have 1 centimeter seam allowance, and so you just need to sew a vertical line combining the waistband so that it's a circle, and you then can place right sides facing together, aligning it with the edge of the top part of your bottom and your front, back and front, of course. And we will then sew a straight stitch 1 centimeter from the edge of the fabric, so that it will hide all the seams that we have done before, the zigzag and everything. So it will hide. So 1 centimeter, right sides facing together, all around, pin and sew. As I told you, in my case, I went back, I did my straight stitch on my waistband, and then I was able to pin and sew as I was telling you. You also need to decide on which side you want to leave your seam. I always flatten my seam when I sew it, but the main thing here is that you need to decide if you want to align your seam on one of the side seams of the bottom, if you want to place it to the back, on the center back, you choose. Our waistband is in place, so it's, for now we are gonna leave it like it is, and let's focus on creating the channels and then the panels for the fasteners. So I'm gonna do two different finishes so that you can decide which one you prefer. On one side I'm going to fold like I'm doing here, flatten down and make a stitch on the edge, and that is the perfect finish that we should do on both sides. But on the second side, I'm gonna do differently. I'm gonna do the lazy version. So I'm gonna just flatten like it is, leaving the raw edge and just stitching, of course with the same length that I'm gonna do on the other side, but just stitching enough for my elastic and leaving the raw excess fabric, which we then will trim. And we will be able to check the difference of the finishes and decide which finish we prefer. So let's go ahead and do both leg holes. However, before I do that, I'm going to trim the excess fabric, not to leave it inside the channel, just like I told you a few minutes, but I didn't do it yet, so I'm going to do it now, and then we'll go straight to our straight stitch machine and do the stitch, and I'm going to explain carefully on the machine, so just keep watching. So I'm going to start with the most complicated one, and I'm going to fold the fabric and flip it like so, and I'm gonna try and make this even with the seam allowance even. So I'm gonna start sewing on the edge of the fabric, and I'm gonna go and fold and sew at the same time. So I'm gonna stop and do this very slowly, trying to make the seam even all along my seam, okay? So let's try and see how this goes. This is that hard to do, and I think the finish is very perfect and beautiful, but I'm gonna do the other option, the simplest option anyway, just so that you can choose, but I really recommend that you do this option of folding and sewing at the same time, because it's not that hard, and with a bit of practice I think it's worth it's really worth all the effort, okay? But I'm gonna go ahead and sew the other side just by folding and straight stitch, and then we cut, we trim, okay? Let's do it. As you can see, the finishes look completely different. One with the raw side that we need to trim, and the other just perfect and finished. So now let's just, don't forget, trim the excess fabric, because we are now going to insert the elastic on both channels. I really recommend that you do the most difficult option instead of this one where we need to trim, because it's not that difficult and the result is much better. Grab your elastic, place a safety pin on the edge of your elastic, check the measurements for the elastic on the pattern, insert the elastic with the safety pin through both side channels, and secure them with a straight stitch on each edge, on the bottom edge and on the front bottom edge, so on the back and on the front edges, okay? And then we will proceed finally for our panels for the fasteners. Once you have this with the correct size, you can go ahead and sew just like I told you. You can adjust this to your own baby or to another measurement if you like. The measurements that we say on the pattern are only recommendations, but of course all the babies are different and sometimes they have thinner legs or chubbier legs. Mine was so thin, everything was big, so you can adjust this of course. So now just do the straight stitch, secure them in place on both edges, and that's it. Both legs also. Before we go to the snap fasteners, let's just trim the excess elastic that we have on our 4 edges. Now to sew the panels, we will place the bottom, back, and also the same for the other side. Right sides facing together. This has excess fabric on the sides, but this is on purpose, so don't worry, we will trim that after. So align the edges, right sides facing together, and pin. Then I'll also include on top of my panel, I also include my stabilizer fabric. I like to pin two first, these two together, and then I place the stabilizer, but this is just me. If you want to do the 3 layers at the same time, do it. I like to pin 2 and then add the thirds, and then we will sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance, a parallel line from the edge, just straight ahead, and that's it. Do the same for the back and for the front panel. This on both sides. Follow carefully these images because it's better than me explaining, and do exactly what I'm doing here. I'm not going to go for fast forward so that you can follow and be sure that you sew this exactly how I'm doing. So with everything aligned like I'm showing, we will sew 2 straight lines very near the edge of the channels. I'm gonna fold again slowly and pin in place so that you can see. Start by folding this small bit here, like so, and then fold the entire panel right sides facing together, aligning the middle and the 2 edges like I'm doing here, and then we will sew 2 vertical lines on the edges where I'm touching now, very near the edge of my channel. I place clips and then I place pins, and I go to my straight stitch machine and I sew this straight, and then we will trim the excess fabric. We need to sew exactly here, a straight line, vertical line, very near the edge, on both sides, front and back of course, so 4 times. Now let's trim the excess fabric so we will have clear edges, clear pattern pieces once we reverse this to the right sides to attach our snap fasteners. After trimming and once we unfold both sides, we can already see how the panels are going to be in the end. So we now just need to align the fabrics and sew so that the panels are closed. Time to also cut the excess fabric that we have on the back, resulting from the flounce, from the ruffles and from the back piece, so that we can go ahead and finish our waist. Once the channels are ready, you can actually see that you don't see a lot of difference between the finishes that we made, as you can see here. But even so, I would actually do this, the hardest option anyway. But the difference is not a lot, so you decide. I think in this fabric, the cutting, the trimming of the fabric is not aggressive, but you decide. So let's move on, trim the excess fabric, do a fold here on the waist, and do a straight stitch and sew here on this line very near the edge of the yellow fabric. Once we sew that, we will need a hole to go with our elastic, so I will go ahead, and I think it's easier for me to cut the hole now. So I went to my side seam, I saw where I need to place the hole, so inside, not facing the outside, right? So I left 1 centimeter high without cutting, and then I cut it 1 centimeter for me to pass, to make a hole, to pass the elastic through the channel, waist channel. And so I went ahead and opened this hole now before it's too hard for me to do it, and I would end up cutting what I don't want. So I'm gonna open the hole now, and then I'm gonna sew the waist. For the finish of the waist, I've decided just to fold inside and then trim, because as I told you, we did on one of the legs and the finish was okay, so I'm gonna do that for the waist. But if you want, you can fold again and do like we did on one of the legs. And so I've now pinned everything all around the waist, and I'm gonna sew with a straight stitch very near where I've told you, so on my yellow fabric, very near the edge. Grab your safety pin and through the hole that we left open, go and insert your elastic just like we did on the leg holes. And then don't forget to trim the excess fabric all around the waist. When I sew my elastic on the waist, I always overlap the elastic by 1 centimeter and sew like 2 parallel lines and 1 diagonal, just to make sure that my elastics are secure. So I place them on top of each other and I sew before I close my hole with a hand stitch. We are almost finished. We are only missing the snap fasteners panels, so we now are going to insert our fasteners, plastic ones. I'm gonna do that in detail so you can see and do it at home if you have the Prym pliers. So the next step for me is to I decided to place this buttons, clear buttons, and I will only have 3 probably. This would be nice 2 and 2, but I will only have 3. So I'm gonna mark the spot on both sides, and I'm going to, before I mark, I'm going to make a stitch, straight stitch with the piece folded like so. I'm going to make a stitch on the edge here, so on the edge there, to make sure that this is finished and all the seams are inside here. And since we have the stabilizer here, this will be resistant enough for all the parents to be pulling the buttons. But as I told you, you can choose these ones that you have to sew by hands, or you can do so many options here. You can do sew Velcro, you can do whatever you want. I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna show you how to use the pliers, the Prym pliers, to apply these ones. So if you want, keep up until the end so you see me applying the buttons. And then in the end of everything, I will also share some pictures of the diaper cover. So I'm gonna share with you my laziness. On one side I wasn't lazy, and on the other one I was. So on the side I decided to, on one side I decided to pin, because on the first one it's not okay. I'm gonna show you. On the side that I've decided to pin, the outside looks perfect, and I have a straight line here, and everything is secure on the outside and on the inside. But on the lazy side, I sew this on the inside and it's very perfect, but of course it's not lined on the outside. So this is the result when you get lazy. I got lazy, and so this is it. Now I have 2 options. I take all of this and I do it again, or I leave it like this, and today I'm gonna leave it like this. And this one will be perfect, but the back part will not be perfect. But today I'm really gonna leave it like it is. This piece is full of experiments. One leg different from the other, and now one panel different from the other. Well, this is quite stable because it has the stabilizer inside. And now I'm going to, with the ruler, I'm going to decide exactly where I'm going to put on both sides the three buttons, and I'm gonna mark them. So the first thing I need to do is grab one of my flat sides. This is going to be outside, and I have 2 of them, and then I have a male and a female for those. And this is the outside, so I'm gonna grab this, and where I've marked, I'm gonna just punch with enough strength to make a hole. Yeah? No? Yeah, I need to make a hole. This is a very resistant fabric. So I'm gonna grab something to help me make a hole. Okay, my hole is here. Not too big, just for this to go. I'm just helping. Okay. Okay, I now have my clear side with this edge here. And now I'm gonna get my pliers. I'm gonna put this side of the clear and nice underneath here. And I'm gonna grab one of the other sides and I'm gonna put it up here. And I'm gonna press with a lot of strength. So I hope it works. Let's see. Done. So one of the clips, one of the sides is done. I'm gonna do the other because I don't want to miss the two correct parts on that side. So again, a hole. The outside clear side there, and the sharp side facing inside. I'm gonna help with this to open the fabric for the sharp sticky. Okay, again the white round shape there. Now this other piece on here, I'm gonna press, and I'm gonna press I hope it is. Ah! This is wrong, as you can see, because I wanted this to be like so. So let me see what I can do. Do you think this is removable? Detachable? You can undo. Undo. Press undo, please. Undo. Where is the undo button? I want the undo button for this. Can you please find it? Okay. So, see? Easy to make a mistake. So the direction was not the correct one. I can still use the same piece, I think. Let me check if it is good. Yes, I think so. And now I'm ready to do it again. And here it is. Okay, so now I just need to do this for the other two that I've marked here. Okay, so let me try and do one perfect for you to see. So I'm gonna make a hole. I'm gonna put my the needle pointing place on the inside. With this I help my fabric to open. Okay, now I have this sticking here. I need to make sure I have a set here. So I'm gonna grab one of these. I'm gonna try and put the same that I put there. So it's this one, and it's going to be like so, to be matching the other one. And now with the white clear, I'm gonna press this with all my strength. And this is secure. And now on the other side, I am going to make the hole again. Just like I did here, the clear plastic side with the sticking edge comes from this side. Again, I help my fabric to open. Don't forget that we are doing this to 2 layers of swimwear and 2 stabilizers. Okay, we have the sticking edge there. And now I'm gonna put the other piece here. And again, my pliers, like so, and press. And here it is. And we already have 2 in place. I will do this for the 3rd one. And this will end up looking like so. I think it's pretty nice. I hope you like the results. This is a 3-6 month size. I wish I had someone to dress this and take some pictures, but I don't for now. So this is the back, but I think it's very, very cute. And that's it for today, guys. Don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel and see you soon.